First question I wanted to get out of the way today was somebody asked, did I put their actual question in? But somebody asked about, they wanted to dry hop their beer and the beer wasn't quite finished, but the recipe said to put the hops in on this day and that they couldn't leave the hops in for more than 2 days because they get grassiness. That's absolute rubbish. I mean, there's might be some small occasions where that happens. It would be extremely rare. And you kind of never even heard of that. It sort of came up with the hazy NIPA days of brewing, I guess, after the craft beer craze, and then everyone getting into brewing and wanting to brew those hazy beers and throw a lot of hops at them. Some hops can cause grassiness more than others. And yeah, you can leave them in for way more than 2 days, usually, before you're going to get any grassiness at all. And sometimes that grassiness can be a feature of the beer too. Maybe not a feature, but it adds to the beer. So yeah, before the haze craze, it was normal to go 5-7 days. 7 days was kind of the normal thing that was said probably 10-15 years ago. And no one ever complained about their beers being grassy. And then long ago, and I'm guessing here, but it was just after I moved into this house, which would have been around 2010, 2011, I was alerted by Dan Pixley. Me and Dan used to be in group chats and things a long time ago, before he started Milk the Funk, or before he was, part of Milk the Funk and all that sort of thing, all that good stuff he's done and got famous and all that. He alerted me to this paper on hopping, dry hopping, by Wolfe, I believe the name was, Wolfe. And we read that, and it went on a lot about dry hopping. And I mean, that report now keeps getting repeated and repeated and repeated, which it's a good report. But again, it was only a couple of tests. But what it actually said was, sometimes you can get the most out of your dry hops in about 2 days, in the perfect example, and it'll start dropping off. But it didn't really start dropping off till like day 4, and even day 4 was only like a tiny bit. And by even day 5, day 6, like, it was the tiniest little drop off. But that sort of story has got legs, and even Scott Janish's book, he quotes that report a fair bit from memory in it, and it was a good report. But it still didn't say after 2 days your beer's going to get grassy or horrible. Now, lots of breweries you'll hear these days will dry hop for 2 or 3 days, but it's a very, very different situation. They use, of course, they've got big conicals, they're brewing big amounts. Even if it's a craft brewery, it's still 200, 300, 500 litres, even more, 2,000 litres. You got to dump, if you're going to dry hop for 2 days, most of the time you got to dump all your yeast. Get rid of your yeast. You don't want your yeast in your beer when you're dry hopping. And especially if you're dry hopping cold and for just 2 days, because you have to, what the breweries will do, get rid of the yeast, dry hop, and then they'll rouse those hops by CO2 or whichever method they've got to do it, to bubble the hops up into the wort. And that's how they can dry hop in a short period of time. If you could do that continuously without destroying the beer, there's a certain amount of bubbling CO2 also strips flavour out of your beer. So you don't want to do it too much, because you're sort of fighting yourself then. So they'll just do it a couple of times a day for 2 days, and that will really help. Again, you've got to get rid of the yeast. Yeast and mixing around with your hops is not a good thing. Once the yeast drops out again, it can take a lot of those good hop aromas and things that you want in there, and why you're dry hopping. You're fighting yourself again. So yeah, perfect world, finish, ferment, drop the yeast out totally. And I can't do that at home. If I'm brewing a 6-gallon batch in one of those fermenters behind me, by the time I get rid of I get rid of most of the yeast. In my FermZilla, I'd probably really struggle, because there'd still be a fair bit of yeast around. And then you've got to try and figure out how you're going to get, especially on the FermZilla, how you're going to get a CO2 thing on the bottom to bubble up through the hops. And it's just, if you really want to get rid of the yeast, most of the time you end up wasting too much beer. In the conicals, it's not too bad if you've got a nice big collection table container underneath. But most of the time, it's hard. And you've got to also have the contraption set up to be able to bubble CO2 through. I don't know how much I trust sometimes the collection jars at the bottom when you're supposed to flush them and dry hop through. You never know how much oxygen you've got out of there. And the smallest amount of oxygen can do, again, fighting yourself. You're doing damage to the aromas you're trying to get in. I'm sort of talking more about technique here. I'm supposed to be talking about just about the 2-day thing. But that's what it's about. People go, I spoke to my local brewery, they do 2 days. It's a very different situation. And there's no point doing 2 days. Taste your beer. Taste and smell the beer. If the aroma's not there yet, you're not going to get grassiness on day 3. Not even on day 4, probably. Not even on day 5, probably. So if the aroma isn't there, leave it longer. I've said a few times here where I've been in a rush and I've waited 2 or 3 days at the dry hop and I've cold crashed and moved it on, and then a week later I've gone back to wash the fermenter. It's been under pressure and hasn't been opened to oxygen or anything. And you open up the fermenter and the fermenter smells better than your beer does, just because those hops have had longer contact time with the beer. So with dry hopping, again, it's just like your fermentation, don't go by set days. If you're reading a recipe and it says, you ferment for 3 days and then that's the end, or, you raise it or whatever, what you should be doing is taking readings and following the ferment and help your yeast along and heat it up at the end to help it finish off. It's not a set day thing. I mean, once you're pitching the right amount of yeast and healthy yeast all the time, you can sort of get into a pattern, but you've still got to watch your actual ferment. And it's the same with dry hopping. If it's not ready, it's not ready. Leave it longer. You're not going to, you've got to have a huge amount of green matter to get that grassiness that's going to affect the beer in a bad way, and usually for a long time. There's certain hops, Galaxy maybe, but you're talking about big amounts and long periods of time. And especially if you're using whole hops, you shouldn't be dry hopping really with whole hops. They're sort of, especially green hops. I should say green hops, fresh hops more than whole hops, but even whole hops. That's another messy situation. But I think that's what I wanted to say on that. I'll just check that I actually did answer the whole question. And about that study again, as I said, that was years ago, and it's still a great study. So it was on the Cellar Dweller site, but if you've noticed, the Cellar Dweller site and Homebrew Network site has been down for the last 6 months or so. We're trying to get it back up. I'm having troubles with my web person, but I'm trying to build a whole new one. But we want to get I had a massive amount of people and emails that we're trying to get off it to move to the new website. But these things all take time. So if you want to find it, it's Wolf Thesis. I should do a quick Google just to make sure. It moved. It originally was on the website. I used to share everyone the email address the website address for it, and then it moved. So then I ended up finding it. It took me a while. Then I uploaded it to Cellar Dwellers, and again, that's probably over 10 years ago or something. But then now you can find it on there if you go on the Wayback Machine. The way people have been talking about it lately, it must be back. I think there might be a study. 2012 it was. There you go. Study of factors. It is there if you search for it. Wolf Thesis dry hops. I'll put the link in if you want to go and read it. I'm guessing yes, it's still there. So they must have re-uploaded it on 2017. There you go. I'll put it in the chat right now. But all right, so that's that question answered. I might stop there and have a break. G'day everyone.